Well, thank you everyone for joining us for another one of our lightning talk. Uh, Today, I will be talking about how to build a scalable iOS application and what do you need to think of. A lot of times, there's a lot of work that goes in and we don't think of how we want to architect things and how do we want to design things in the early days. So I'm going to be doing a walkthrough about some of the things that we need to consider in building a scalable application and why do we need to do that. So I'm Nader Khraizat. I'm the mobile engineering manager with InRhythm, here to talk about the iOS scalable architecture. And to start off, what happens if we don't build a scalable architecture? Well, the first thing is it's going to be so hard to maintain, and the code's going to be extremely complex. We're going to have a lot of tight coupling, and often every time we want to make a change or we want to redesign, all those are going to be major refactors. On top of that, we're going to have a lot of poor performance, crashes. The app is going to be super slow, and that's going to impact our reputation and our rating. On top of that, it's going to be slow development times, slow build times. Every time you want to write something or update a few lines of code and trying to build it, it's going to take so long to do it. So it costs valuable time and money. So why do we want to build a scalable architecture? Well, think about it from the perspective of building a house versus building a building or skyscraper. If you are building the foundation for a house, once you go 1 floor, 2 floor, maybe you put in a 3rd floor, but then when you want to put 5th floor, 6th floor, or even above, you're not going to be able to do that because you don't have the right foundation. So what you have to do is pretty much tear the entire the house down and rebuild the foundation from the ground up. And this goes in also from the plumbing, the power that it's going to need and all that. So those are some of the things that we need to take into account while building those applications. So what's the first thing that we want to do? The first thing we want to do is want to think modular architecture. And by that, we mean identifying what a clear modular architecture is going to be. And by that, we want to make sure that, one, we don't build a mini monolith, but at the same time, we don't want to build 100 micro modules. So we need to figure out what is the right balance. And that's clearly the design logic as well as the business logic that would fit into those modules and create those criteria around them. And it would be a great idea to create scripts or to create those modules using scripts so that we can gain consistency and not have everyone being built in a different way. And one of the key things that we gain from creating a modular architecture is that we're able to reuse the same module in different applications or in different areas of the application, so that you only build it once and you can use it in 2, 3, 5, 10 applications without having to rewrite the same exact code. And also, you also only test it once. So when you build that test or those tests for that framework, then you run those tests when you move it to another applications. You don't need to test all those scenarios. You will need to do some integration tests and make sure that it is working the right way. But for the majority of the tests, you don't need to rewrite all of them. And on top of that, you also gain the build time. You will get a fast build times, and it doesn't require you to build the entire application every single time. So it would be a great idea to add playgrounds to each one of those modules so that when you make a change for that module, you only build that module. You'll be able to see it live as you make those changes. So you don't have to, build the entire application and see all the changes and navigate from one screen to another to get to that area and then do that work. Next up, we also want to work on using dependency injections. One of the core things that we want to do is we want to make sure that each module is independent. And using dependency injection help us decouple that and making it easier, one, independent, and two, easy to test. And this would enhance the user experience because it will improve the performance and the responsiveness of the application. And we would be able to build the features faster. And then the other thing that we need to think about is building dynamic frameworks, right? So we want to be able to, a lot of times when, in some cases, when we build certain frameworks, we have a single focus in mind, and we want to try to avoid that. We want to build dynamic frameworks. And just to kind of give like a simple example, if you're building a calculator, right, and you're trying to perform an addition, right, don't just build that process where it takes like two numbers and perform an addition. Build it where it takes two numbers and perform an operation, because that way you can reuse it with addition, subtraction, multiplication, division, and whatever else that comes next. And then we also want to focus on building the center of excellence, right, around modular architecture. So it's really important that we work as a single team, and we gain consistency by agreeing on these are the certain technologies that we want to use, so that we don't have different areas of the code base doing different things. And after we create, the modular approach, we want to make sure that we're building the right foundation. So first of all is we want to have clear requirements, not just to what we're building now, but what will be the future goals. We do want to look ahead. We don't want to just build what we're currently working on and just have that focus. We want to see how it's going to scale up, how like giving the first example that I was given about the skyscraper, we want to talk about how many buildings we're going to go, how many floors we're going to go up. So having that thought in mind is going to help us scale things up. And we always want to use the latest technologies. And then, we want to focus on removing a lot of the tech debt. In a lot of cases, there's teams that focus on features. We need to build features, and we neglect that while we're building that, we are creating tech debt. And then, with Apple releasing new technologies, new frameworks, new tools every year, we want to make sure that we do stay up to date and not be, 1, 2, 3, 5 years behind, right? Such as using Swift UI, async await and combine, some of the new navigation stacks and the split views. Staying up to date. We do want to define a clear architecture that works for the app and stick with it. We can't have, in certain areas of the application, we're following MVVM, and in the other areas, we follow a different design pattern. We want to make sure that we do stay consistent across. There are sometimes that we do merge design patterns, but it needs to be in a way where it's focused and already identified in which areas we need to follow, for example, MVVM versus other areas. So moving forward, we're continuing with the foundation. It's easy to kind of just grab a third party and say, this is what we'll do, right? But it kind of gets more complicated as we start to rely heavily on third parties. So we do want to limit third-party activities, because in a lot of cases, it gets really painful maintaining them. And in a lot of cases, no one is actually maintaining those libraries or those frameworks that we're using. So then they get outdated, no one's updating them. And in some cases, they don't follow the latest industry standard. And some cases, we might move into, for example, iOS 16, and those third-party libraries don't support iOS 16 yet. They only support iOS 15 and under. So that's one area where we need to be cautious about. Use third parties at your own risk, but try to minimize it. And if you do want to use third parties, use adapters, right? One of the things that we want to do is we don't want to generalize. For example, if you're using analytics, right, don't have it centered around the analytics framework and library that you're using. Make it dynamic so that if the time comes where you want to remove it and do another one, then it's easily interchangeable without having any impact on the application. One of the things that we also need to focus on is that we don't want to neglect analytics and monitoring, monitoring or SRE. It's really important that we create those warnings and alerts to let us know that the response time is increasing, or it's getting to a point where we're about to hit the timeouts and it's going to impact our users, or we are getting crashes, right? We need to be notified as soon as possible rather than getting calls from the customer saying that the app is failing or the app is crashing. We need to own that, and we need to be able to know that ahead of time. Localization is also key. We need to make sure that we use localization for consistencies as well as supporting other languages in the future. And also accessibility, in many cases, it does get neglected. And until last minute or right before the release, we're like, okay, well, we need to add accessibility. And Apple does a great job in providing us out-of-the-box accessibility tools. However, in some cases, when you start to customize things, it does kind of become a little bit, you need to write your own accessibility and customization. So make sure that you do think of accessibility early. And then DevOps and CI/CD pipeline are crucial for a scalable application. Manual work is so repetitive, and it is really mentally exhausting, slows you down, prone to errors, and costs a lot of time. So automate everything you can automate. If you can, anything that is manual that can be automated, do it, because it might cost you a little bit of time initially, but it will save you hours and hours every week. And that goes up to a lot of money. And then, we also need to think about static analysis tools and, Swift length, blocking the PRs that don't meet the criteria that we have, generating builds, creating new modules, like I said at the beginning. And there's so many other things that we need to account for within the CI/CD pipelines, as well as, just kind of other DevOps work, scripting things. Documentation and knowledge transfer. This is also really important. If we are building a scalable application and have so many different teams, right, one of the core things that we need to focus on is consistency, making sure that all the teams remain focused and following the same standards. Because in some cases, we have two teams writing amazing code, right? But if they're not working together, the pieces of the puzzle won't fit, right? Even if it was done separately, it would be great and the app would be amazing. But as we work in a team, we need to make sure that we're working as a single team, and each one of those sub-teams are actually sub-teams and not just each one working independently. One other thing is Apple does provide us a lot of tools, and Instrument is crucial. There's a lot of areas where we won't know until we test it. So it's not just about testing, the functionality of the application, but it's also testing the performance of the application, testing memory leaks, testing the battery usage. There's so many things that Apple does provide us with instruments that a lot of times we don't take advantage of. And then we only know after the release, right? So don't forget that we do have instruments and to use them. Testing. This is a huge topic that can take an entire workshop by itself. But the one thing that we need to focus on is, as we're building a big scalable application, we need to focus on test coverage, not code coverage. It's not about this line being tested. It's about testing the functionality, right? That it is doing things the right way, and testing the edge cases as well, right? Because as we grow, we want to get to a point where we maintain a like 80 or 90% test coverage. And then that way, when we start to release new code and make some changes, we do have a sense of confidence, a big sense of confidence that this did not break our applications if our tests pass. We still need to do other tests too, of course, but unit tests, UI tests, integration tests, we do need to focus on all of these. And then we do need to be strict about this. It won't happen at the beginning, but once we get to a point where we do have the right coverage, we will need to block the PRs if they don't have enough tests in there. And the PR process, it is the safeguard for making sure that you do have clean code and consistent code that's following the center of excellence that's built by the team. Caching is also very important for optimizing application, especially applications that do have multiple calls, and in some cases heavy calls that they do make. So caching mechanism is a way where it optimizes the performance of the application for so that the user doesn't see or doesn't have a loading spinner the entire time or every time he moves to a screen. Creating a networking layer as its own separate framework that can be used across the entire application. And then also one thing I didn't have here is having that authentication and security as well. This is also crucial that we would have. And there are other things that we can use, such as app thinning, where Apple does allow us to optimize the application and then minimize the size. Especially if the application is pretty big, you should definitely consider using app thinning. And I did have a couple of images that Alan showed in his presentation, and I thought it was very, very helpful. And it was super cool to kind of show what we talked about in more visual format. So for modular approach, we have the blue and the green cubes. They are different cubes, but they do fit together. So that's how building modular approach enables you to grow at scale, but kind of all the pieces fitting together. Reusability. If you draw on a piece of paper, after you're done with that piece of paper, probably gonna throw it away. But if you have a board, it's reusable, it's sturdy, it will stay. Maintainability, the paper cup, once you're done with it, you probably throw it away. But then, having a glass cup that will stay. Also, one thing that I thought of is, it can be dynamic, and it can fit water, it can fit coffee, it can fit pop. So it's multi-purpose in a way. And finally, like the expandability, kind of like building all the pieces. You can build each individual piece separately, or each individual, for example, like the house and the tree next to it. You can build that separately and then just come and attach it to the whole structure. I thought that was just an amazing way to show this. So you can build it and just add all the pieces together. And that was just kind of like a high level about what we need to think about. There's still so much more, but those are some of the key areas where you need to think about while planning on building a scalable application. And finally, I did want to mention that we do have an iOS Summer Summit that's happening on September 19. It is a half-day workshop where we're talking about, an introduction for scalability and building a good app design. And then we'll talk about iOS. We'll do a deep dive into iOS 16 navigation, and then we'll have some code demos, and then talk about modularization, and finally accessibility. Thank you all for joining me today. And then just a reminder, we do have lightning talks every Thursday at 5:15. Next week, we have our DevOps Summer Summit happening on Thursday, as well as James is going to be doing a DevOps lightning talk as well. So tune in for next time, and we'll see you next Thursday. Thank you.